there's a lot of great things going on in the industry. Obviously, we're going to get to the Daytona 500 conversation, but there's a new short track package. And I want to talk about that because, the Daytona 500 is a restrictor plate race. And there's not, the next time that we run this package is a few weeks, but we know that, there was this sort of groundswell of support to bring more short tracks back into the series, and we all want that Saturday night beat and bang, emotional, short track action that we were seeing at Martinsville, the drama and issues that it would create being in the playoffs and so forth. The Denny and Chase, Truex and Logano, all of those sort of moments. Even Denny and Bowman. We wanted to see if we could, get more of that into our series. But after racing the next gen car at the short tracks and the road courses over the last year, we really recognized that style of racing suffered greatly with the new car. Why is that? So, they got a lot of undercarriage downforce. You got the diffuser on the back and all kinds of things that are channeling air under the splitter underneath the car. There's all these little wings and sort of valleys that they have created to really move that air under the car to the diffuser so that it will maximize really a good potential to create downforce. This was a great idea because forever we've complained about aero push and being tight behind the lead car. Well, if you're creating downforce underneath the car, that shouldn't be disturbed as when you're following someone. You should still be able to create downforce. You're going to lose that downforce on top of the car with the spoiler and all those things. But so this was a great idea in theory, and it's produced some great racing at the 1.5 miles and so forth. But at short tracks, we really, really suffered. Bigger, wider tire was one part of that. The braking performance greatly improving. Made the braking zones really, really short. So if you tried to charge into a corner and outbrake somebody, you couldn't do it. Everybody's braking performance was so exceptional. And so NASCAR is going to they had some tests. They made some changes that they're going to implement going forward. They're going to run a shorter spoiler. I think it's a 2-inch spoiler. And so it's about, going from a 4, I think, to a 2-inch spoiler. They're changing a lot of things underneath the car, all right? And basically, the diffuser will look a little bit different, and they're taking away a lot of the things that sort of direct that air to the diffuser. And all of this should change the car about 300 pounds of downforce underneath, which I think is a smart move. I would love for them to see what racing might be like without a spoiler.
Right, because you've been asking for that spoiler to go for a while.
I know. There are people that think, man, that's a bad idea, that it's not, and maybe not even necessary because of what kind of downforce is generated underneath the car. But, I mean, let's just take it out of the equation for once and see, right? But anyhow, that's another conversation for another day. All of this stuff that they're going to change for Martinsville, short tracks, Richmond, and other places will take about 300 pounds of downforce away. That is a good change. That's a significant change. It's also going to take some drag off the car, so the car will feel like it has more horsepower. It will slightly have more acceleration down the straightaway. That drag being off the car will require the driver to use more brake, to start braking sooner, right? If that drag is not there, it's about 50 counts of drag. And so that should lengthen the braking zone slightly, right?
Well, yeah, it should. If they're going faster down the straightaway, they have to brake into the in the braking zones a little harder.
Yeah, and without the drag slowing the car down,
right?
Also increasing braking there. So I think those are good things, good direction. I am not certain that it's enough. I think that is it a big enough swing? I don't know that it will be. A couple of things that I feel like are worth considering is, and I talked to Letarte, and he brought this up, which is a great idea. NASCAR's trying to make changes without requiring the teams to buy new parts.
That's right. That's a huge distinction.
Yeah. Everything that they're going to do, they have to get approved through the teams. The teams could obviously, NASCAR could put a package forward, and the teams could go, no, we don't want to do that. That's going to cost money, not doing it. go back to the drawing board.
Right. It defeat the purpose of the next gen car to begin with.
NASCAR has come up with a package and a change that will require nothing but removing parts, right? So the teams are okay with that. But going forward, I think it might be important to, if the braking zone is 100 feet, it needs to be 300. They need to they need to lengthen this braking zone. And how do you do that? You take away braking performance, you take away tire or downforce, right? So maybe some spec parts that greatly decrease the braking performance would serve NASCAR really well to multiply the length of the braking zone so that, I can try in that 300 foot of braking to drive the car further down in the corner, right? And that gives me a bigger runway, to operate and try to outperform a guy or a girl in the braking zone. And so, if that's 50 foot, that's there it is. It's over. Braking zone's done. We're in the middle of the corner. I didn't really get much of it. There's a very small runway to try to do something different. Now, when you have to brake way back there just past the start-finish line, now we're talking. Now we're giving ourselves opportunities to try to charge the corner a little further or make mistakes.
See what drivers are willing to do.
Yeah.
And they're all different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think, too, something that is more unlikely to happen is a narrower tire. Now, they're not going to go back to the small wheel or the older style tire and wheels. That would require massive changes in the braking components, and the brake discs are so much bigger. We are stuck with this wheel.
The wheel's not changing.
No, but they could make the tire more narrow. They would need more. They would need new wheels that would be narrow as well to manage that. Probably, I don't know that. I would if there's a 10-inch or a 12-inch contact patch. If we went down to like 8 inches of contact patch, a narrower tire would give you much less traction. You would have to slow down sooner for the corner, so that you didn't blow through the middle of the corner or swing the back in the middle of the corner due to the lack of contact patch or lack of literal tire on the ground. So another idea, if they can't, if they wouldn't be able to really go to a smaller wheel, smaller tire to get more, get some tire off the ground, it's possible that you could do a treaded situation, a treaded tire.
Wow. Okay.
All right, if a treaded, you have the same tire we have now, but treaded would remove rubber from the racetrack, remove contact packs from the racetrack, but that would create new challenges as well with heat and so forth and chunking the tire. But it's worth looking at. Now, I've talked to Ryan Preece about this, and he's like, man, the tire size is not a problem. Look at the modifieds. The modifieds run a massive tire, and they have great racing. But what the modified has that we don't have in the Cup Series is a lot of fall off. They have a softer tire. Their tire wears out. And so if NASCAR, and Goodyear could find a way to make this tire degrade severely, right? And we don't want it to fail. We don't want it, we don't want to put the drivers in any kind of danger. But what we do want them to do is slide around and have, after 40 laps, be on worn out tires, just hanging on, not able to use the throttle off the corner, spinning the rears. Basically what I experienced at Florence this past weekend, right? And so a much, much softer, degradable tire is going to be necessary to make that happen. We have begged for that from Goodyear forever. But Goodyear, I don't know if they even could do that.
And not knowing anything about that, I wonder why they can't do that. I mean,
I don't either.
Why is that so hard to make a compound that just falls off quicker?
Yeah. When they, we would love to get a Goodyear guy in here to talk to us about this, but a lot changed over the last decade and a half with Goodyear in terms of the chemicals that they use in the tires. They went to a greener tire, and when that tire they went to a much greener tire and took out some of those components. The tire wore differently, where it was more of a gumball and kind of would ball up these little marbles, and it's now more dusty in terms of how it wears away. But anyhow, the tire's important. It connects the car to the road. Does Goodyear want a tire that wears out? Is that going to help them sell tires to mainstream America on the highway? If their tires are literally just falling apart on the race cars, is that good? maybe they look at that and go, no, we don't want to put a tire out there that wears out in 40 laps.
That's a fair point.
I'm not going to be able
Hard
to
to dispute
sell.
that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to sell Jim Bob a set of 4 Goodyears over at the tire store, at Tire Pros. I'm not going to be able to sell old Jimmy Bob tires when he sees them things wore to the cords in 40 laps at the race at Martinsville.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something.
There's logic in that. There's also a
must-
counter argument you could also make is like, well, look at all the PR that Goodyear gets every week about why is this tire the way it is? I mean, like you could argue that both ways.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. Now, so keep going because you've got all these recommended changes.
That's it.
Well, listen.
That's my case. I've stated it.
Then if I could play just devil's advocate, because I really just don't know. Like it sounds to me though that your changes would require more expenses, right?
Yeah, and these are changes that I wouldn't say I would ask the teams to take on today. But these, if this does not produce anything worthwhile this year, we're gonna have to spend some money.
We're gonna have to spend some money. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that they're doing something right now that is not just going and asking teams to spend money.
And this ain't just short tracks. This is road courses too.
That's right.
You could kiss these short tracks goodbye. If we don't find a way to make compelling racing happen with this next-gen car at Martinsville, at Richmond, at Bristol, people will stop going.
You're 100% right.
And those racetracks will get replaced.
And I was trying to think about that. Why is that so important to us? And I think I know why. Short tracks are personal for NASCAR and for stock car racing because that's if we can't get short tracks right, this is our stuff. The stock cars belong on short tracks. Now, we'll go to intermediates, we'll go to super speedways, and we'll try out road courses like we do. But short tracks belongs to us. IndyCar doesn't do short tracks right. Yeah. All those other racing series don't do short tracks right. That's go all the way to the grassroots, whether it's late models or whatever. That's us. If we can't get that right, it says something. So it's almost like it's personal because you advocate for short. Everybody advocates for short tracks, right? Why? Because that's it's like our family. It's like it's deeply personal. The short tracks are.
That's right.
You know what? You could talk about Kansas. You could talk about Chicago. You could talk about those tracks if they don't produce good races. Don't talk about my Martinsville. Don't talk about my Bristol. And then, let's get to the fairgrounds. Let's go try to, create these other short tracks. That's when we start getting offended. But then if we can't do our own racing on it, if we can't put our own cars on it and it race well, then that's a problem and it's something we got to fix.
That's right. Hopefully, like I say, the changes they're making are significant. We're going to find out how much that, will matter and beware. NASCAR, they're ready to make more changes. They're not going to let this suffer
for all those reasons. They know how important they are. By the way, if anybody wants to take this another layer and really kind of understand how the manufacturers built their bodies for this next gen car and why Toyota didn't really do well at short tracks, go listen to Action's Detrimental this week. Denny Hamlin gives a master's class on what happened with the Toyota on short track specifically and how the changes, like you said this last week where, you try to address one change on the next gen car, but it has an effect somewhere else, right? And in trying to cool down the drivers and what they did to cool down the drivers and dissipate that heat, it affected the Toyota's short track package because in the way they built their body because it was all centered around the spoiler and now you're cutting holes here and cutting holes there and all that stuff. And then he said that's why Toyota sucks so bad at short tracks. Well, now they're all resetting the deck. They've resubmitted their stuff. They're all looking and seeing if there can be in a box, is how Denny said it. The downforce and the drag box, right? Like these things and trying to have parity. And after they made those changes last year, Toyota was they fell out of that box. Now he thinks they're back in the box. I sent him a text saying, hey, with this recent these new changes that they're suggesting, how does that affect Toyota anymore? He doesn't think that those changes are big enough to where it'll really affect anything. But I just think it's very interesting if you really want to understand, the effects of that stuff and how the manufacturers go about submitting it. Go listen to Action's Detrimental this week.
Hey, if you like that video, you'll love the entire podcast. The Dale Jr. Download, it's available on all major podcast platforms.